Okay, everyone. Folks are still trickling in, but I'm going to get us started in the name of making the most of the hour we have together today. My name is Danielle Hubley. I manage advocacy and education with the Partnership for Strong Communities. The partnership promotes equitable change in Connecticut housing policy by coordinating advocacy, advancing research, and uniting diverse partners. And we operate under the vision that everyone in Connecticut should have a safe, stable home that is affordable to them in an equitable community of their choice. Today, during our legislative session and budget briefing webinar, we will spend the hour together by first hearing from Bill Welz, lobbyist with Gallo and Robinson, as he provides an overview of this year's legislative session, some of the political makeup of Connecticut's General Assembly, and key dates and deadlines for advocates to be aware of. Then we'll hear from Ghio, Policy Director with the Partnership for Strong Communities, and he'll walk us through what the partnership's legislative priorities are headed into the 2026 session, covering affordability, housing creation, housing choice, and housing stability. And then we'll close out the hour hearing from Amy Peltier, Coalition and Advocacy Director with the partnership, and she'll highlight some updates and changes at the federal level pertaining to affordable housing policy. And we'll share some ways that you can get more involved in our advocacy efforts this year and beyond. We'll close out the time that we have together answering questions that you all will submit through the Q&A box. So as such, please use the Q&A option at the bottom right-hand side of your screen. This will allow you to pose any questions you have to our panelists, and partnership staff will be monitoring and helping us to respond to as many questions as we can in the time that we have. Fortunately, Bill has to jump for another meeting a little early, so once he finishes up his section, we'll leave some space for questions pertaining to anything that he covered. So please plan to engage him before he leaves if you have any questions for him. Just some general housekeeping. We're recording today's conversation, and we'll share the recording and presentation slides with everybody who attended and also who registered following today's conversation. So please keep an eye out for that. If you know anybody else who wants to be privy to these conversations or was looking for this information but wasn't able to join us live today. And that was my super quick housekeeping. I'm really excited to dive into today's conversation. We've got a lot of really great conversations and information to share with you all. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass things over to Bill to get us started.
Thanks, Danielle. Nice to see you all. I'm looking at the attendees list. It looks like it's a group of people that I have seen many times, so I'm glad that you guys are able to join us again for another session preview. We're already in it, but it is a preview because we're in the second week of it. But hi, Bill Welz. For the folks who don't know me, Gallo and Robinson. I've had the pleasure of working with the Partnership for Strong Communities since I was hired by Kate Robinson in 2019. And I believe that Gallo and Robinson has been the Partnership for Strong Communities exclusive lobbyist since their founding. And so I'm very happy to be here. It's very fun to work with this team here and get some good stuff done. So I want to talk to you right now about what is going on in the Capitol and what will be going on in the Capitol. Take it away. So just a reminder for folks, you probably all know this, but we have our statewide composition, governor, and just a reminder that all these seats are up for re-election this November. We are in an election year. So Governor Lamont, Lieutenant Governor Susan Bisowitz, State Treasurer Russell, Comptroller Scanlon, and AG Tong, and Secretary of State Stephanie Thomas, all Democrats, all from various parts of the state. They will all be up for election this November. So this is the last session before re-election. Also, a reminder that all 7 federal representatives from Connecticut are Democratic. What's going on in the actual state house? The state house of representatives is still the same number it was last year, 101 to 49. There were 2 special elections, and the elections did not change the party composition of the house, so it remains exactly the same. And the leaders are the same as last year. Matt Ritter is still the speaker, Jason Ross is the majority leader, and Ben Candelord is the minority leader. And then in the state Senate as well, there's been literally no changes because there's been no special elections at all. It's still 25-11. They got that super majority in the Senate, and Marty Looney is still leading the Senate with Bob Duff supporting him as majority leader and Stephen Harding as minority leader. what will happen is all these folks are also running for reelection this November. So when reelection happens, after that, the caucuses will get together and then they will elect leadership again after the election. So we'll see what happens after November. Reminder on legislative committees. There's 26 of them. You guys know the big ones: appropriations, finance, judiciary. Then the smaller ones like housing. Each committee has cognizance over different issues in different state agencies. You can see their cognizance on their websites. They're joint committees. They're not just some states do committees where it's a Senate committee and then a House committee, and then they figure stuff out. We do joint committees, so senators and members of the House sit next to each other. They hear bills together, they vote on bills together, and they move it as a joint committee and then send it to the first chamber for action. Um, Chairs and membership of each committee represent the ratio of the number in the caucus and in each chamber. So that's why you'll see more Democrats on both on the House side and the Senate side on committees. There's always one House chair, one Senate chair from the majority party, and there's always one House ranking and Senate ranking from the minority party. A committees are the larger ones, as I said, appropriations, judiciary, GAE. They usually get more time to do business, and they meet on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. B committees are the smaller ones that are more are unique, like housing, for example, is a B committee. Aging is a B committee. Human services is a B committee. They meet Tuesdays and Thursdays. The policy committees, public health and human services, have a front end workload. Their bills get a lot of the bills end up having fiscal notes and they can be referred to appropriations or finance for further consideration. The budget committees, appropriations and finance, see their work come later in session. They might be doing public hearings on the governor's budget now, but they have a lot more time to actually work on the budget and get their product out. The committees are divided into A and B based on size. The committee process, just a quick kind of blush view of how a committee process goes. In order for a bill to pass anywhere, to start anywhere, it must be raised and it must have a public hearing and before it can even be considered for a committee vote. What happens in the public hearings? The public, legislators, state agency commissioners, local elected officials, various other people, they usually testify or submit written testimony. After the public hearing, there's usually a form of screening within the committee where the chairs of the committee decide which bills will be placed on an agenda for a vote. And then finally, it will be placed on an agenda, and members of the committee will be asked to make action, either a yay or a nay. There's a difference between a straight JF and a JFS. A JF means that the committee passed the bill as it was heard in public hearings with no changes. A JFS means a joint favorable substitute. That means that the committee decided to make some amendments to the bill after the public hearing and then pass it to the floor. In order for a bill to pass the committee, it needs a majority vote. And each bill that passes receives a joint favorable report from the clerk, which has a comprehensive summary of the bill. But which then, when it goes to the floor, it gets also a fiscal note and a nice report from OLR, the Legislative Research Office. Bills can be referred in committee. They can take no action on them. They can actually refer them to another committee if they don't think it's within their cognizance. Bills can also be referred to another committee on the floor. So there's other ways where the bills can move around. And here's a quick version of how it becomes a law, and that's my favorite picture because I'm Bill on Capitol Hill, and I like the school rock is always makes me chuckle. But after the bill has been vetted by one or more committees of cognizance, it's sent to either the House or the Senate, based on whether it's a House or Senate bill for consideration and debate. The leadership of the caucus determines the priorities of the day and what they're going to do. They often do their own version of screening where they decide what bills they're going to act on. They try to do a bunch of agreeable ones on both sides of the aisle, and then they figure out which ones are going to be the long talkers and which ones are not going to be the long talkers, but maybe only their caucus is supporting. So they read the joint favorable reports when they make these decisions because they find out who testified for and who testified against, because that's all in the JF report. As I said earlier, bills can often be referred from the floor back to another committee for further consideration. These are called floor referrals. In order for if a bill passes each chamber, if one chamber amends the bill, so if the House passes a bill and then the Senate decides to make a change to that bill, in Connecticut, that bill has to go back to the House and voted on in full. If the House decides to make another change, then it would have to go back to the Senate. We don't have a system that that deals with changes. You have to literally send it back to the other chamber if you make a change. After it passes, it goes to the governor's desk for final action. The governor has three options. He can sign the bill, which means it becomes law. He can pass it without his signature, which means he doesn't put his signature on it, but it becomes law because he made no action, or he can veto it. During the session, the governor has 5 days to act on a bill. In the off session, the governor gets 15 days. The legislature can override a veto with a two-third vote. That's 101 votes in the House, and that's 24 votes in the Senate. Which, so as I said earlier, with that supermajority in the Senate, it's pretty easy to override, although they rarely do. And the House is, right now the numbers are like right at that level where they could override a veto if they wanted to, but one member could peel off and then they don't have the override vote anymore. So just to show you how close and how many votes it takes to actually override a governor's action. So what's going on with the budget, like the process in it? Well, right now, the governor already put out his budget adjustments. He did that last Wednesday. The partnership did great write up on that, and Sean's going to talk to you about that later. But the governor made his adjustment. It's out there in the world. And so what's going on right now? Right now, the appropriate, and I'm sorry that it says late February, early March. It's literally happening as we know. We have the dates. We can actually, I'm sure the partnership can share with you the dates, because for you guys, what would be interesting is obviously conservation and development, and we have that date. I think it's in a later slide, but right now they're in public hearing session. People are coming to the Appropriations Committee and they're testifying on the governor's budget, telling the legislature whether or not they should support it or reject it or modify it. That's going to be happening every day for the next all next week and a little bit of the week after. And then those subcommittees are going to do follow-up meetings with the state agencies, and they're going to ask them kind of questions based on what they learned in the public hearings, and the state agencies are going to provide responses. The appropriation subcommittee chairs of each committee prepare recommendations to the chairs. Those recommendations are not public, although we'll often say, can you please put this in your recommendation? Can you please put that? And legislators may tell us, yes, I put that in there. We'll actually never see that document. It is not public. The committee has a deadline of April 2nd to wrap up the budget end of their work. Finance committee has not as big of a process, but a similar process. Approps does way more public hearings than finance does. Finance is really focused on the governor's bonding and revenue package, and they typically do a day where they do bonding and a day where they do revenue. The bonding subcommittee also does the same thing that the approach subcommittees do. It reaches out to the agencies after the hearing with follow-up questions. And then the bonding subcommittee chairs also prepare recommendations to the chairs, which is not public. Their committee deadline is the day before approps. So now for this upcoming session. We are in a short session. And it already feels like we've been in here forever, although it's only been we're on the second week. So it's 13 weeks long, February 4th through May 6th. It's a budget adjustment year. They are not taking a whole new budget and working out the kinks of a whole new tier budget. They're taking the budget from last year and they're looking at modifications to it and making kind of quicker decisions because they don't have as much time. They're basing those decisions based on the most current data, including available tax revenue and expenditures from the federal funds. Last year was the budget setting year, and next year will be another budget setting year. Just some issues that are out there that folks are probably aware of. Everybody reads the press, everybody knows what's going on, but I'm not going to list this whole list. I'm sure my slides will be shared, but you can see the legislature is not shy of taking on a wide variety of mega big issues in a very short period of time and hoping to resolve some of these. I don't know if they'll be able to resolve all of them, but some of them are continual work in progress. But some of them, I think the legislature is poised to solve this year. So in the short session process, as I talked about in the committee process, all bills must be raised by the committee or be emergency certified bills. There's no individual legislator bills unless they pertain to budget or revenue. So last year, you guys might saw an onslaught of bills introduced. This year, there's still an onslaught of bills, but there's a lot less, and they're more narrowed towards budget and to revenue. Um, Even in a short session, committees are taking on new issues, and it's a great year to test a policy. But they generally use this session to clean up stuff from last year. It's typically the cleanup session. So a bill that maybe passed one chamber but didn't get to the final chamber, or a bill where they they thought they had a solution to it, but they didn't have enough time in the General Assembly time length to get it done. They used this year to kind of clean up, to get their singles and doubles done, and and wrap up for before they run for reelection. For public hearings, remote testimony is still an option. It's a good option for people, especially folks who are working far away or can't leave their jobs to get to the legislature. So, I encourage people, if you can come to the Capitol, in-person testimony is the best. But if you cannot, remote hearings are a really good option for you. Committee meetings are still running hybrid, meaning that sometimes you'll be in the room and you'll see like 5 legislators, and you'll be like, "Where's the rest of the committee?" Well, if you look on the screen behind you, the rest of them are on Zoom, usually from their day jobs or trying to make their way from one event to the other. But that's only for the committee process. When it comes to actual voting in the House and the Senate, they can vote from their offices in the building, but they cannot vote from like home or work. They have to be in the Capitol. There's a geofence around the Capitol so that their vote, if it's calculated within the Capitol, it counts. So we're seeing now, during the pandemic, you didn't see a lot of legislators going into the chamber. Things are kind of getting back to normal. Now you'll see, when the bell rings, a parade of legislators come out of the House caucus room and the Senate caucus room to go vote. So, which is a good thing. Glad to see legislators back in person. The thing that I don't love about short session, being a progressive lobbyist, and I'm sure you guys don't either, is that the election is always looming in a short session, which can dampen a lot of controversial or progressive things that folks want done. So that's always kind of looming in the session. It's definitely looming right now. Some approach dates that are important for you guys to recognize. As I said, we already covered opening day. It's out. Read Sean's email. It's really good. It tells you what you should care about. Approps is doing their hearings as we speak. As I said, here are the dates. They started on the 10th and they'll be wrapped up by the 23rd. For you guys, super important. I know it's a Friday night. I know it stinks, but conservation and development is Friday night, and that is the time to really testify on the Department of Housing's budget and what is needed. So folks should remember that one. And as I said, Probst has a committee deadline of April 2nd. On the finance side, their hearings tend to be later than the appropriation schedule. The agencies are usually heard at the same time as the public. They go first. Probst breaks them out and does panels in the beginning of the day to go over through the agencies. Finance just does a routine public hearing because their hearings just aren't as long. And as I said, they usually separate the governor's tax and revenue package from his legislative proposals, and their deadline is the April 1st. Session dates of note for everybody here. Just going to skip ahead to where we're actually at. I always like to remind people of the holidays, because on the holidays, there's nothing happening. So we have a holiday tomorrow. The legislature's back in on Friday, and then they won't be back in until the 16th. And as I said, appropriate hearings are happening 10 to the 23rd. I already talked about the C&D hearing. The deadline for both committees in a short session, A and B, to raise a bill is the 19th and the 20th. The 20th for the A committees and the 19th for the B committees. So if you have not seen your bill raised by that date, it won't be raised because they have a very short period of time to raise bills in a short session. What are we doing? Right now folks have been doing hearings. We're meeting with the approach chairs, and we're going to be meeting with the conservation and development and bonding subcommittee chairs to talk about partnerships priorities. In March, housing has the earliest deadline out of any committee in the General Assembly. Their deadline is the 12th, so they're literally going to get running next week and have their first public hearing on Tuesday, and they're going to go pretty fast from there because they don't have a lot of time to work on bills. Planning and development, for folks who are on the zoning side, they get more time. They have till the 23rd. And sometime in that mid-March level, both Conservation and Development Approach Subcommittee and Bonding Subcommittee will have their reports due to the approach chairs. Once again, not public, but they will be due. So if you're trying to influence appropriations or bonding, you got to really get that stuff in before mid-March. And then April and May, we're already at the, can't believe you're in three little lines. We're already at the end of session, but I already talked about the deadlines. We are basketball. We are a UConn nation in the capital, and we're all very hopeful that UConn will progress to the Final Four. And if they do, those dates are really important because it's very unlikely that anything will be happening on those dates if UConn's in the Final Four. I also like to throw in Hartford school break because the House is usually unlikely to convene on school break week in Hartford. But after that, April 20th and on, it's a ramp up, and especially in a short session, that's like 2.5 weeks. They're going to be coming in like almost every single day and voting on bills until the end of session. They usually do a Saturday session on May 2nd. On May 4th, historically, that's the Monday before the last Wednesday. They release a budget that we can all see, and the House immediately votes on it and gets it out of the House. And the Senate usually does it on the last day of session before they CNDA. And then on the budget side, as you guys know, we're on the seventh year of a surplus under Governor Lamont. Surpluses are a good thing, and it's great to be living in a time where the state has a little more. But we have a budget reserve fund that's at its maximum, $4.1 billion. It's 18% of our general fund, which that means that if we went into an economic crisis nationally and we needed to support the state budget, we have a budget reserve fund that we call it the rainy day fund that can literally support the budget for a length of time of that recession. So that gives us 18%, $4.1 billion. You know, people can argue about how long that would keep a budget, but we have one of the most healthiest rainy day reserve funds in the nation, and it's definitely an accomplishment of the legislature and the governor to have a good rainy day fund. For the and that, It's actually the seventh. This is a mistake, but for the seventh year, we've exceeded our cap, so we've done a good job. Um, by law, all the operating surpluses go into the teacher and state's employee retirement funds. That takes care of the longstanding pension liabilities of the state of Connecticut. And then there's usually a $2 billion volatility adjustment on top of that. The special session used $500 million in surplus to pay for the impacts of the big, beautiful bill and the government shutdown. You guys might have saw last week, not on opening day. The Senate did it on opening day, but the House did it the day after. Originally, that $500 million was supposed to time out when they came back into session. They reauthorized for that funding to be extended longer so that the governor had more ability to spend that money and deal with immediate problems if the federal government shuts down or if they cut certain things from the budget that are meaningful. Just some current budget projections for you guys. As I said, we've had a few years of surpluses, and folks are quite thrilled about that. And if you look in the out years, we are slated to have a lot more surpluses. And we have a surplus usually on top of the volatility transfer. They don't ever track the volatility transfer as a guaranteed thing. That's why those two numbers are different. But the state comptroller will always tell you what the surplus will be, and then sometime around April and May when they're finalizing the budget, we get to understand how much of that volatility money is actually not volatile and is there. So there's some projections out there, and as I said, this is based on our readings of the wonderful reporting from Keith Vaneth at the CT Mirror, who does a really good job reporting the budget. If you guys aren't reading Keith's stuff, you should. He really writes well, and he explains the budget way better than I can. But it's important for you to know that there's surpluses and then there's more money on top of the surpluses that essentially we can't use because it goes towards long-standing liabilities. I'll stop. I'll take some questions before Sean and Amy get into the partnerships package. And I'll just repeat for Danielle. You can throw questions in the Q&A and we can look for them.
Thank you, Bill. We'll give it a minute for folks to drop in any questions. But thank you. This is a great wealth of information. for folks returning to the legislative process and folks jumping in for the first time. So thank you for joining us. All right, we're already a quarter of a way through our hour this morning. I'm not seeing any questions come through, so Bill, I release you. We will be monitoring the Q&A. Thank you for joining us. Still, so if folks have questions for any other part of our presentation, please drop them in. We'll do our best to answer them. But without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Sean to legislative priorities.
Thanks, Danielle. So as Bill mentioned, it's a budget adjustment year this year, second short session. So I'll just quickly highlight some of the governor's proposed budget adjustments related to housing, the rental assistance program funding, excuse me, which is in the housing homeless services line item. There's in the second year budget, there's generally deficiency appropriation proposed by the governor. In other words, to make up for potentially cost overruns in the existing fiscal year. So the governor has proposed $14.5 million deficit of a deficiency appropriation for the housing homeless service line item, and that's again where RAP sits. And I think it's a recognition of continued rent increases, which make the RAP program more expensive. In his proposed budget adjustments for 2027's fiscal year coming in July 1, there's a $10 million baseline adjustment to that same housing homeless service budget line to maintain housing stability for the existing number of RAP vouchers out there. There's about 6,400 rental assistance program vouchers. Again, a reflection of rising housing costs, and in order to have those vouchers be worth enough to keep rent for those tenants. And then, excuse me, it also budget adjustments maintains funding in the budget, two-year budget for some new supportive housing RAP vouchers. This was adopted in the budget in June, this past June, and intended to support another 212 Head Start and housing vouchers, along with new vouchers for the Department of Development Services and elderly and disabled, targeted vouchers for elderly and disabled voucher holders. On the bonding side, the budget included considerable bonding authorizations for housing, and those are preserved. There are no adjustments proposed by the governor. The governor, housing bills and the governor's proposals. So the governor's office proposes legislative priorities each year. And one of those is related to housing, and it's HB 5092, an act protecting renters from rent increases upon the transfer of residential property. If you watched the governor's address at the opening of the legislative session, he talked a little bit about this, and it's really an effort to prohibit new owners from spiking rents upon purchasing a rental property, and proposes to limit that increase for new ownership in the first year of ownership to the greater of 5% increase in rent or a relevant inflation rate, whichever is the greater. And there's some other conditions that limit the new owner's ability to raise rent in that first year. And the way it's proposed now is the tenant would make use of the Fair Rent Commission for relief. There's several questions about the bill that will be worked out, I think, as it works its way through the committee process. One of those is what about tenants that live in communities that don't have a fair rent commission now, or communities that are not required to have fair rent commission. So I think that's one of the outstanding issues with the governor's proposal. Next. So partnership with strong communities, we tend to think of our work around housing in four buckets: housing affordability, housing creation, choice around housing, and housing stability. So we tend to use this framework to talk about what we want to see in terms of a healthy housing system in the state, right? So let's start with housing affordability. And these are these are our priorities for this coming session. The first is to protect and expand the rental assistance program. We see, as I mentioned just a minute ago, the governor's budget adjustments recognize increased costs for the existing number of vouchers, and he's proposed some adjustments accordingly. We know RAPs are rental vouchers, housing vouchers in general, if they're federal or state, one of the best ways to provide housing security and to folks that are most in need of stability in their housing situation. Right now, the state has, as I mentioned, about 6,400 RAP vouchers. We're asking the state to invest an additional $50 million in RAP to assist an additional 3,400 vouchers, RAP vouchers. And we'd like to see improved program data reporting. It's difficult I think, for the public to always understand how a lot of our government programs are operated, and the RAP is no exception to that. I think we all need a better understanding of how these investments are being made, who's benefiting from them, and if they're really targeting the most needy. And there's no doubt that that's the population served by RAP. So um, that is another priority of ours. And why expand RAP? As I mentioned, it's a relatively quick way to increase families, low-income families and individuals' housing stability. And we know it's an ongoing problem with costs around housing, particularly in the rental market. And vouchers, there's such a large number of individuals and households and families that qualify, that are eligible for housing vouchers that are just the program has not been able to reach yet. There's between federal vouchers and the state program, there are about 50,000 vouchers in circulation in one way or another, but that leaves over 170,000 eligible households without the support. And as we know, uh, vouchers are an incredibly effective intervention to prevent homelessness or end homelessness. And when we have a housing affordability crisis, individuals experiencing homelessness really are the final expression of an inadequate system, right? It's what happens when you truly can't afford or find a place to live or afford a place to live. And homelessness numbers are increasing again and have been for quite a while. Vouchers are a great way and a very effective way of tackling those numbers and to really provide that stability to folks. Next slide. Housing. Our second bucket is housing creation. And I mentioned the 2-year budget included considerable bond authorizations for affordable housing development. We're lucky. The state has really a history now going back for a few administrations and really investing in affordable housing development, and that continues and really has accelerated under the Lamont administration. And so we see these funds are being maintained in the current budget, as I mentioned earlier. What we'd like to see is a continued increased focus on first increased transparency in how the bond allocations are made and exactly which sort of income bands of housing are built with our bond funding. We think it's incredibly important that the state support the creation of housing that the market can't or won't create. And that means housing that's affordable to very low income and extremely low income individuals. Next slide. So this just chart quickly shows you what I mentioned. You could see going back several years, the increases in the Housing Trust Fund and what's called the Flex Fund. These are the two main bonding fund, receptacles, if you will, funds that the Department of Housing makes use of to fund affordable housing creation and rehabilitation. And you can see the last 2 budgets, there's been an incredible increase in those authorizations. And that's really the first step in the bonding and getting those dollars actually to work creating housing. The authorizations are sort of like putting the money on the state's credit card, and the final step is the state bonding commission putting those dollars out on the street usually through the Department of Housing to create that housing. Next slide. All right, housing choice is our third bucket. And housing choices really, everyone should have an opportunity to have options in their housing choices in Connecticut. That should be and it shouldn't be dependent on your income. So we all have to make choices about where we live, where we're working, proximity to family, the type of housing that works for our family, and there should be a variety of choices everywhere for families. And what we know that the Affordable Housing Appeals Act, Section 830G, has been around now for over 30 years, is really a critical tool that has to be protected in the state that allows a lot of that variety of housing to be created in towns that otherwise refuse to permit it. And we know zoning is a big part of this, and we're looking forward to supporting zoning efforts that legislators are likely to propose in the session. And next slide. And one of those was raised today, I believe, and for the Housing Committee. I flag it now for folks to pay attention to and to watch for more information from us. It's likely to be coming before public hearing very soon. And it really builds on the housing reform uh, bill that passed last year, or excuse me, in special session. I guess it was last year. It feels like it was yesterday, but HB 8002. This bill really is looking at starter home creation. In other words, smaller homes on smaller parcels of land that are inherently less expensive than very large homes on very large lots of land. Another way to think of it is homes that the market regularly used to create before excessively large lot sizes became the norm across the state. So please keep an eye out for information on this bill, and we're going to be looking for support to really continue to expand to make it easier to make the kind of housing that's naturally affordable. You'll hear a lot about naturally occurring affordable housing, and I want to tell you right now that's nearly impossible on a large lot. So look for more information soon. So one of the things underlying our focus on choice is really the fact that we don't see it in the state right now in a lot of communities. And um, we recently had a report around rental deserts, this concept of there's larger portions of our state where you're not going to find a ready supply of rental homes. And obviously that limits choice, not just for lower income families that are are much more likely to be renting, but for people at all stages of life that prefer to rent or need to rent. And right now, a lot of the state they're locked out from the state, creating more longer commutes, disrupting family life, creating greater auto emissions. There's a lot of other liabilities to the state. And really, we're long past due to facing the reality that we can't allow communities to just lock out an entire class of people. One that almost all of us are at one point or another in our life. I certainly rented, and frankly, I hope I can rent again when I'm older and don't have to have a home that I own, and I don't want to cut the lawn much longer. So, housing stability. Go ahead, move on. Then housing stability we've been supporting the coalition led by the Connecticut Tenants Union, Make Road Connecticut, and Connecticut Fair Housing Center to expand existing just cause eviction protections. Right now, folks 62 years or older and folks with certain disabilities and larger complexes, they have that right. That should be a right for all tenants. And it's particularly when we're in an environment as I mentioned, where affordability is such a problem because housing supply is so constrained and there's so few choices, rental choices for families. This is a long overdue expansion, and it's just a common sense change that we continue to advocate for, and we hope you'll do that with us. Uh, in the interest of time, I think we'll just move on. And I'm happy to take any questions at the end about Just Cause or anything else I shared.
Thank you, Sean. Reminder, folks, drop your questions in the chat. I saw some questions come through, so thank you for engaging. I'm going to turn it over to Amy, and reminder that we'll share these slides out. So, Amy, maybe if we just do like a really quick, high level, what's need to know on the federal funding, and then we can wrap up and make sure we have some space for questions at the end.
Sure. Yes, this is meant to be a pretty high level overview of where things currently stand. The partnership is an active participant in the New England Housing Network and is Connecticut's representative at the National Low Income Housing Coalition Policy Forum in DC next month. So we continue to track federal housing strategies and offer advocacy when we can. So I won't explain too much the federal appropriations process, but just like Bill talked about in the state, the Congress has to do the same thing. On February 3rd, once the Department of Homeland Security appropriations package was separated from a minibus bill that contained transportation, housing, and urban development, Congress passed and the president signed into law the THUD budget. So you may know that the DHS appropriations, which includes ICE, is still being discussed on Capitol Hill and has not been voted on yet. With respect to the THUD appropriations, key rental and homelessness assistance programs received their needed funding through this appropriations package. That includes housing choice vouchers and Section 8 renewals to cover renewal of all existing contracts. There were new appropriations for tenant protection vouchers, which will allow housing authorities to transition households on emergency housing vouchers that were started during the COVID period and were due to expire this year. Those families with the additional appropriations for TPVs can be now moved over to a new type of assistance. Homeless assistant grants programs will actually see an increase, and that is in emergency solutions grants and the continuum of care programs. But according to the National Alliance to End Homelessness, this is not enough to fully renew existing programs. Where we will see a significant gap in funding housing needs will be in our public housing. There will be a $477 million loss to public housing operations and a $210 million loss to public housing capital funds. Policy shifts within the THUD bill include codification of a requirement that HUD follow established rulemaking processes. It has attempted to curtail these regulations, both in its continuum of care notice of funding opportunity, which I'll talk about quickly in a minute, as well as skirting established processes and changing other standards, like HUD's proposal to eliminate the Fair Housing Act's disparate impact standard. That rule prohibits housing discrimination based on categories of protected classes that may be experiencing intentional discrimination, and it's been civil rights legislation that has applied for decades. Regarding the impact we'll see in Connecticut, this will be especially felt within our public housing authorities. Connecticut public housing stock tends to be older and is already behind and underfunded on maintenance and repairs. So our PHAs heavily rely on operating funds due to things like our high utility costs in Connecticut. So less attention to maintenance leads to poorer quality homes, ultimately with public housing authority units becoming unsafe for habitation or potentially coming out of available stock and leading to fewer available units. And ultimately, this will be added to our policy that Sean discussed around needing an expansion to our state rental assistance program. You can go to the next slide, Danielle. So last November, many homeless service providers and housing advocates had to react quickly and drastically when HUD's fiscal year 25 continuum of care notice of funding opportunity proposed restrictions that would have pushed 170,000 people nationally into homelessness. In Connecticut, so I will say in Connecticut, COC grants support over 5,000 homes, and that's about 6,500 plus renters statewide. Here in Connecticut and elsewhere, COC funds support permanent supportive housing, transitional housing, and rapid rehousing, and additionally offer support services and data collection. Current COC funding levels in Connecticut are about just over 98 million, and those are awards to DEMIS, DOH, and to different nonprofits. Other key protections in the THUD appropriations bill related to the COC funds include establishing a timeline by which HUD will need to non-competitively renew. So it means, if applications don't have to go out, but they must non-competitively renew existing COC grants awarded to communities who have already had them. So HUD must release a new fiscal year NOFO by June 1st, and they must award funding by December 1st of 2026. And again, all expiring COC grants, and they're over different time periods, but they must renew non-competitively until awards are made, which means a new notice of funding opportunity has to go out and people have to apply. Some of this is being held up in the courts, so I won't take up too much time talking about that, but those are kind of the high level big changes. Danielle, if you want to go on. So this is our opportunities for action. Now that we've shared with you all of this information between the process from Bill, the substance from Sean, we'd love for you to be an active partner advocacy to promote our current policy priorities. You can utilize, thank you, Alicia, for dropping the action link that's the same as the QR code on the bottom left of your screen about how you want to be involved. And there's a checklist that includes examples like using our online tools to submit written testimony, and sharing our action alerts and fact sheets on social media with your elected officials and your networks. We have lots of templates and lots of ways and tools to help you be an advocate alongside us. And please reach out and connect with us based on your interest.
And just a quick note before we move on, we're currently working on template testimony and alerts for RAP advocacy for the appropriations subcommittee hearings that Bill mentioned earlier. So if you're on our mailing list, you'll get those, so keep an eye out. If you're not, now's a great time to sign up to be privy to all of those great templates Amy mentioned that we have on hand to support your advocacy.
Yeah, and I'll just say one of the best ways to continue your advocacy is to get more informed. Thank you for coming today. That's the first step, but we just released about a month ago the 2025 State of Housing in Connecticut report. It covers all kinds of topics. It will inform you. It will support you in being an advocate. So I really encourage you to take a look. It's broken out by all different kinds of issues, so you don't have to read the whole thing. It's really meant to be a resource and a toolkit for you to use. So this is a plug for our affordable housing conference that will hold in November of this year, another opportunity to engage with us and learn. And I think finally we'd love to know what you thought of our presentation today. If you want to take a short survey, we would appreciate it. We want to make sure that we're answering all your questions and providing awareness in a way that works for all of you. So I just want to go over, oh, it looks like some of our questions were answered. Does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask? So one of the questions, and this is a great question, are wrap vouchers returned if the tenant can't find an apartment due to housing shortage, and how often does that happen? That's a great question. We know that it can be really challenging not only to find housing that will fit your needs in terms of affordability because of the shortage, but it's also landlords also have to be willing to accept a voucher. So landlords have to be active, engaged participants in the process of people being able to use a voucher. And the Road to Housing, I will just say the Road to Housing Act last year, things are a little bit differently. That's probably, I'm not sure we'll produce a robust report on that, but that bill has significantly changed from where it stood last year. And so we're looking at some other federal legislation instead. So maybe circle back to us, or you can reach out to me. I'll drop my email in the chat as we follow some of those federal housing policies as they're going through Congress. Let's see. Any other questions?
I just saw the one about the QR code. Yeah, let me pull that back up.
Be kind, Carla.
All right, awesome. There you go. We'll leave that up. And I'll also send it out in the follow-up materials from today's webinar. I'll share a link so folks can respond then if you don't have a moment to respond now. Awesome. Can you also send info on the housing conference? Yes, right now, I think it's just the save the date, but as the organizer for the conference, I can let you know that usually in the summer we send out a call for proposals. So if there is a housing topic that you would like other advocates across the state, country, nation interested, local conversations, anything under the sun related to affordable housing advocacy or new research, start thinking about it now. You can reach out to me. I'll drop my email in the chat. Happy to have a dialogue beforehand or in the lead up to or once we get those call for proposals out. I will also say that the record of all of our affordable housing conference conversations start dating back to 2020 now. Are in fact available on our website. So if you're a housing policy wonk like me and you want to spend, I don't even know how long it would take you to go through all of that content, but there's a ton there for you to explore. So if there's a topic related to affordable housing, it's probably been covered in a past conference or is something that we're talking about already for this year. Awesome. We'll leave it open for a few more minutes, since we still have a few more minutes before the hour closes out in case folks have questions. Again, you can always reach us via email. Anyone on the partnership, you'll be able to get to someone who has the information you're looking for. So please stay in touch. Let us know how you're most interested in being an advocate, and we'll be here to support you. All right. I'm seeing people start to dwindle out. Oh, I just saw something come through. Yeah. Has there been any conversation on using wraps to cover the loss of emergency vouchers?
So if that's, John, if you're referring to the EHVs that were started in a response to the pandemic, the understanding is that there will be additional TPVs or tenant protection vouchers that are awarded locally through, I'm not exactly sure the process. I actually have that exact question into CBPP if they are aware of how that process will work. So EHVs are set allegedly through the THUD budget to be covered. So I'm not I think that has sort of changed the local discussion around RAPs covering those folks in particular in Connecticut, though we are looking for a RAP expansion because, as you know, there are still many people who qualify for them and are still not receiving them. And if we start to lose or see the loss of public housing units in respect to the THUD appropriations this year, and how that funding will be cut, that's another area where we're hoping the state can step in and lead and expand that program to address folks who then qualify for public housing as well. But I think there's less of a conversation about RAPs specifically covering EHVs now that appropriations should be covering that.
Thanks, Amy. Great question, John. Awesome. All right. Well, I'm not seeing any other. Whoa, I just shouldn't have spoken so soon. I just saw one come through. Oh, awesome. Thank you. You're welcome, John. All right. I did not speak too soon. I'm not seeing any other questions come through. So I am going to give you all back a few minutes of your time. Thank you for joining us here. Like I said, the recording will be made available in a couple of days, early next week. We'll share out the survey link and the link to our budget analysis, which was shared in the chat earlier, but just so you have it on hand. Thanks again, and happy session. We'll see you all the way through and to the end.
Please engage with us and let us know how you'd like to be a part of our advocacy. We'd love to connect with you.
Many thanks, everyone. Have a great day.